And we are live. Hi, everybody. It is so
Hello.
good to meet you in person after chatting so much, like over text and stuff. Claire was talking before you joined Skye, and we were saying that even though we're in the Realm of Darkness set together, we've never actually spoken. We've only ever seen each other's posts in Facebook. And I've talked to Melissa, but I haven't actually gotten to speak to you either, Skye, in person. So thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
So we have a really exciting show today. Thank you for everybody who's joining. This is another episode of Indie Author Live Chats. I'm Katherine D. I'm a fantasy author. And with me today we have Melissa Wise, Skye Horn, Clare, is it Sager?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
Okay, yay. Clare Sager, and a potential surprise guest who said she's going to try her best to join today. So I won't spoil the surprise. If she hops on, we'll be yay. But her schedule's super, super busy, so we're going to enjoy our chat. Um, Author Raylan Fry says, hello, hi. We're so glad to see all of you. If you have questions for the authors or about anything we talk about today, please drop them in the comments section and we will be happy to answer them. But we're talking about 2022 and what's going on in our book world. For the sake of those who are watching who don't know all of us, why don't we go around clockwise? So Melissa, we'll let you start off and I'll go last. Tell us a little bit about who you are, what you write, and why you're on the Fantasy Romance Live.
Okay, I'm Melissa Wise. I'm a fantasy romance author slash kind of fairy tale retelling is kind of the two I bounce back and forth to. And I really like writing fantasy romance. I think there's a lot of freedom that you don't get maybe in other genres in the fantasy romance, and that you can add a lot of elements that you can't add maybe in other genres. And I love romance. I read romance. That's the main thing I like to read. So that's kind of what I also fell into writing when I started writing too.
Yay. So my name is Clare Sager, and I write fantasy romance and romantic fantasy. Sometimes people don't differentiate between those two, but basically it just means that fantasy romance is, it's a romance plot line focused on the couple or menage or reverse harem, whatever, getting together with fantasy elements and in a fantasy world, whereas romantic fantasy is fantasy plot line with like a strong thread of romance running through. So I write both of those. And I was always looking, I was always reading fantasy books, and like there'd be like a slight hint of romance. I'm like, no, I want more. So then I kind of found there are other people like that. Yeah, exactly. I would have to read historical romance to kind of get my romance fix. But then I discovered that there are other people like me who liked reading that and also wrote it. So that's how I kind of found my home in the book world.
I'm Skye Horn, and I also write fantasy romance and romantic fantasy. I like that you differentiated because there is a little bit of a difference there. I am the author of the Kingdoms of Fairy series, and it's a young adult fantasy romance that has been out about a year and a half now. So that's why I'm here to talk about what's coming next in 2022, and really excited to be here.
Well, we are really excited to have all of you. I'll keep mine short because most of my viewers are going to know who I am, but I write a lot of different kinds of fiction. Usually it's fantasy or dark fantasy where romance is a subplot, but I am also writing a dark fantasy romance for the Realm of Darkness set this year and 2 dark fantasy novellas that are coming out this year. So excited to be branching out with you guys because honestly, Melissa, you were one of the first indie fantasy romance authors that I ever met or ever knew about. And your book Hades Queen was the first one that I ever read, and I was just like, this is really great. And then I saw Skye, and I saw Wings of Fate. For those of you who aren't familiar with it, I'm dropping the links in the comments to the Amazon pages for all of these authors. But the Wings of Fate book caught my attention by the cover. And then, of course, I met Claire through Realm of Darkness. And so now in the Realm of Darkness set, I'm meeting tons of fantasy romance authors, and I have more fantasy romance than I can possibly read. And my to be read list is crying. So, with everything going on, oh, hi, Luna. Luna says hi. With everything going on this year, I've talked to a lot of authors, and they've said they're drafting, a lot of them are querying. What book projects are in the works for 2022? We'll start with Skye and sort of go reverse order this time.
Cool. So I have a couple different projects in the works this year, which has been really exciting. It's been a cool change because last year was all focused on Kingdoms of Fairy, which is my Wings of Fate series. So first of all, I'm re-releasing Wings of Fate and the rest of the series as a hardcover because I did not do a hardcover release last time. So I'm going to have a special edition coming out later on this year. I'm already working with the cover designer and really excited about that. I have also drafted a new series, which is a new adult paranormal romance series. So I'm branching a little bit off the fantasy romance, but it's still pretty close. So that one's going to be a shifter, fae, and vampire series. So a little bit of everything in there. And I can't talk too much about it because I am going to be querying it later on this year. So I'm really excited about that. I just got it back from my beta readers. But besides that, I've just been busy, with the writer community because I'm also a co-founder on there and working on book 2 because book 1 of that paranormal romance is all set. So lots of exciting things. I'm really thrilled to be here and very excited about the hardcover because I'm going to have a bunch of bonus material in there and it's going to be really cool.
Yes, and Raylan says that's so exciting. Very excited for the hardcover special editions. I'm going to have this in my life. Are you going to do signed copies?
I am going to do signed copies, yes. I'm working with another author right now, and we might actually do a book tour with those hardcovers. So she also has a book coming out toward the end of the year. So we're kind of collaborating on that. And I'm going to do signed copies, special edition, especially of the first book. That's going to be my main focus for this year is the first book.
That's awesome. All right. So, Claire, what's going on in 2022 for your books?
Well, I just got to say, Skye, it's very exciting about the hardbacks. So looking forward to seeing those. That'd be awesome. I am currently actually working on wrapping up one of my series. So Beneath Black Sails series, which is, as the picture might suggest, fantasy pirates. So yeah, my next release is the last book in that series, which is Through Dark Storms. And I haven't announced an exact date for that yet, but I've just said Q1. So keep your eyes peeled. I'll be announcing that soon. So yeah, I'm working on that at the moment. I've got a book in the Realm of Darkness box set with you, Catherine. I haven't revealed anything about that one yet. So all my books, though, are in the same world. So I call that the Saberverse, and it's kind of an 18th century-esque fantasy world. So you've got like swashbuckling kind of adventures like Three Musketeers, that sort of thing, as well as things like I don't know if you can see on the cover, but like flintlock pistols and that sort of thing. So all of my books happen in that world anyway. So my Realm of Darkness book will be in there as well. I'm also just trying to see if there's anything else I can hold up. I've also got a new series that's going to be starting in that world. So and that's going to be related to one of the characters from Beneath Black Sails as well. But again, I haven't announced that. But that's going to be like a lot of romance, court intrigue, a bit of poison, betrayal, fae, and all of that good stuff. Oh, you're still muted, Catherine.
Oh, sorry. So we don't get too much of a hint at what's coming in your Realm of Darkness book yet, but maybe more's to come?
Yes. All I'll say is that one will be a fantasy romance, so it's going to be a standalone story. And like I said, it's in the Saberverse world. And it will also involve fae and an element of enemies to lovers. A lot of my books tend to. So yeah.
Yay! So I've got writing and special editions and special projects. Melissa, what's coming up in 2022? Because you just launched your debut last year, and it took off pretty good.
Yeah, I need the hardcovers. Also, Skye Horn. So, right here. Yeah, I am working on a sequel to Hades Queen. Hades Queen, this one was my debut novel. And I'm working on a sequel to Hades Queen called Cupid's Muse. Cupid is a side character in Hades Queen. And I thought, I might give him his own story, and it'll be a retelling of the Cupid and Psyche mythology story. And I'm also working on, I'm a few chapters into a retelling of Peter Pan, which I kind of call Hook. That's the working title anyway. I'm terrible at titles. Where it's told from the perspective of the pirate James Hook instead of Peter Pan. And it's kind of his journey of this adult man who's trapped in this child's world. And I can't say too much about it because it's nowhere near finished. But and then I also have another book coming out, which I don't know if we're talking about what's coming out yet. But
Yeah, go for it.
I have a book coming out that's called A Thread of Magic, and it's a retelling of Rumpelstiltskin. And it's about another retelling of a classic fairy tale, and I'm really excited about that one. Super excited about that.
Yeah, I'm excited about that one too. That's actually one of my debut books that I've signed for Starry Ink Press. So very excited for that one because I've got the draft and I have it. I can't say much about it, but more to come. I love Peter Pan retellings. I don't know of many Peter Pan retellings. I mean, do you guys know of many? I'm still new to the fairy tale retelling world.
Only the film versions. I haven't seen very many books that were retellings of Peter Pan.
I've kind of noticed a few more around recently. One that springs to mind actually that is on my TBR is, let me double check the name because I'm terrible for that, but it's by R.L. Davenor. Sorry, you talk amongst yourselves. I'll double check.
So there's a lot of good things coming this year. If you're joining, because I notice we have a lot of people on, if you have questions for Skye or Melissa or Claire, feel free to drop them in the comments and we will answer them. We're just talking about book news for 2022. So as far as all these projects go, what some of the viewers may not know is we are all indie or hybrid authors for the most part, which means we've self-published some, we've indie published some are trying to be traditionally published. So what is the hardest part of being a fantasy romance author as indie? Or is that the joy of doing it indie? Is it easier than going traditional, in your opinion?
I would just say I just found that book. It's A Land of Never After by R.L. Davenor. So I'm looking forward to reading that one. That's a slightly darker Peter Pan retelling. So I'm going to try that one out. Hardest thing? I don't know, what do you guys think? I would say there's great elements of being indie, for sure. Melissa, what sort of, how's it work for you?
I think the hardest part is editing for me. Being when I was doing indie, was editing, and the editing can be very difficult. And one of the best things that I think about being an indie is that nobody tried to change anything about my story. Hades Queen is exactly how I wrote it. I didn't have to change anything about it to get it to a place where It was ready to be published. As far as the story elements go, I really liked that about having a lot of control over the story. But the editing is kind of, finding a really good editor is difficult sometimes.
Yeah, and Skye, you're an editor and an author. So I'm really interested to see what you have to say, whether that made it easier or harder for you.
Well, I will say that I'm an editor and an author, but I also have an editor for my books because I do feel like, even though I edit other people's books, it's a completely different experience than editing your own. So I obviously go through a lot of self edits on my books before it goes to my editor, but I have a really good relationship with the editor that I work with, and she makes my story better every single time. So I agree, though, that editing process is really difficult in the indie world or in the self-publishing world because you do have to find someone that you trust with your book, and that can be very difficult. You don't have a publisher on your side saying, oh, this editor has good reviews or this editor has this experience, and you're kind of just on your own. Same thing with cover design. If you don't do your own covers, which I did not because I am not talented in that way, if you don't do your own covers, then you have to find a cover designer who knows how to work with KDP and Ingram Spark and Barnes and Noble and all the different platforms that have different criteria. So that side of self-publishing can be very difficult, and it can be kind of a rabbit hole when you get on Google and you're trying to teach yourself how to do it all. 4 books in, I feel like I'm okay and I know what I'm doing now, but I definitely felt that way at the beginning where I was just like, oh, I don't know. Am I doing this right? So that's what I love about the community, though, is that you can always reach out to other indie authors and self-published authors and ask what they did. And most people are pretty open to sharing their experience and their recommendations.
Mm-hmm. And that's a great segue into a question we got that was, do you view other indie authors in your genre as competition or as friends? And I'm just going to put my 2 cents in, and then I'll let y'all say whatever you think. I've been newer to this than all of these amazing authors on the call. But I have found the indie author community to be very supportive, very open, like Skye was saying, very helpful. They've sent me tons of resources. We're doing calls like these. Even bigger authors that are like USA Today, New York Times best-selling indie authors have still been very open and helpful, and I have not had any negative experiences. And so while, yes, we write the same books, when you're indie, you have to produce everything yourself, and that means that there's gaps when you don't have books coming out. Even if you're putting out a book every 4 months, most of our readers read a lot. So it's like, okay, well, you're not reading my book right now, but you can go read Claire's or Skye's or Melissa's, So I don't know. I feel like it's sort of a team effort, but I'm curious to hear what your experience has been because all of you are newer, and Skye, you're one of the members of the writing community, like the official The Writing Community. So
Well, for me, I agree. I think that the community is of both indie authors and traditionally published authors, I think, that you find are very supportive, and they're very wanting to help with the situation. And that's not everybody. There are authors out there who don't want to share their experience, and they do view this as a competition, but that's just not my experience personally. I feel like I have always had a really good support group in the community that I've found, in the tribe of writers that I have. I like to call them that because they're my group and my ARC readers and my beta readers and everybody who goes into this process with me, because I definitely don't do it alone. I've got my editor, I've got my cover designer, I've got an ARC team that reads my book ahead of time. I have my beta readers who give me feedback ahead of time. So all of that goes into it. And I think that if it wasn't a supportive community, that I wouldn't have that type of team. And so that's my experience so far in the past couple years of being in this. And I love it. I love going out there and supporting every other author as well. That's one of my favorite parts of being in the indie community, is being like, hey, you've got a book coming out. Let me read it. Let me review it. Let's get on Goodreads and make sure everybody marks it as want to be read. And, hyping everybody up is kind of part of the fun.
Yeah, I've also had a really good experience with other authors. A lot of times authors that are kind of in the same genre as me. I'm their biggest fan. I'm like, let me get this book, let me get that book, that sounds good. And I'm just like, and and if it catches my attention and it sounds interesting, I don't mind if it's similar to something that I'm working on or that I have out. I'm like, let me get that. And I'll review it and I'll hype it up as much as I can, because if I love it, then people who readers who might like mine will probably also like something similar to mine. So I'll throw that out there as well.
Yeah, definitely. And like you said, Catherine, I've found that I'm mostly I used to be more involved with trad authors, but not so much anymore. But the indie community is so, for the most part, like open and willing to share. So like you're saying about getting recommendations about, oh, I'm looking for this type of editor, who can you work with, kind of thing. Oh, this is who I worked with, I'd highly recommend them. Same with cover designers and VAs and things like that, definitely. And I actually run a romantic fantasy shelf with some other amazing romantic fantasy and fantasy romance authors. So Miranda Honfleur, Catherine Glenn, and J.M. Butler, or Jessica Butler, and also Monica Enderley Pierce. So we all run this Facebook group. We've also got a website and everything, and we all write the same genre, but none of us kind of go, oh, no, I want to keep all the readers to myself, because, I mean, you've got readers who literally read a book or more a day. There is no author in the world who can keep up with that. So me sort of trying to, oh no, they're mine, stay away, like, and treat others like competition is kind of ridiculous, really. So yeah, like, and also if people, like I said, I spent so long not knowing there was a romantic fantasy or fantasy romance readership and sort of genre out there, but I only found that because other books like that existed. So you need each other, and it's once people go, oh, I didn't realize this genre existed, and they might find Skye's work and then might go gobble all of that up and then go, okay, what else can I read in this genre? And then they go to Melissa's, and it all feeds into each other, and working together you get so much further.
Yeah, that's so true. And for those who are watching, if you're a writer watching, I'm dropping the link to the writer community's website here. They've got a lot of really helpful blogs and resources and tips that come up, and there's an Instagram page too that I've personally found really helpful as an author as I've gone through. And I follow a lot of the individual like ambassadors. I don't know what the term is, Skye, but like Luke, Courtney, and Skye, and of course Megan. So, and then genres too. So don't feel like, oh, it's only fantasy romance. It's not. So, but yeah, we've got some other questions that have popped in. What would you say is the hardest part of self-publishing? Is the next one. For me, it's been the marketing. The marketing. How about you, Melissa?
Same. I don't know how to market. And I'm like, should I buy Facebook ads, or should I just put out my own, or should I like hire somebody to handle the marketing for me? I have no idea what I'm doing.
How about you, Claire and Skye? What's been the hardest part?
I'd say the hardest is kind of, how do I put this? So knowing what the right thing is to do. I think in a lot of situations and a lot of maybe like careers, you can go, oh, so my husband's an architect, for example. He knew that he needed to study these things at school, then he needed to go and study this at university, do this, the way is set out for him. And when he's at work making decisions, there's like a process and a protocol, and it's kind of quite clear that this is the right decision. Whereas I think when you're an indie author, you might have all these things that you want to do. Like, I need to do some advertising. I need to do stuff on social media to improve my marketing. I need to write the next book. I need to get covers booked for this. But I've got all these other book ideas. And what order do I do them? There's so much. And it isn't always clear as to what the right decision is. about, you know, what project you should pursue next or what kind of cover you should give it. So I think it's that decision making of kind of like being, you want certainty, you want to kind of go, oh, this is the right decision, and as long as I just make, you know, between left and right, as long as I choose the right option, I'll be okay. But there isn't one, and I think kind of accepting that often there isn't, like, both decisions will have good and bad about them, but there isn't one right way, and I think that's kind of a challenge.
Yeah, I agree. I think that, you know, there's, like I said earlier, there's this rabbit hole that you can find yourself falling down of all these different ways to self-publish. And there's no really right answer. You can do it one way or you can do it another. And some might work for some people and certain books. And every genre is a little different too, especially on Amazon, because, you know, there's different types of genres that do well on Amazon or do well in Kindle Unlimited or need to go wide, or there's lots of questions you end up asking yourself. And I think another thing that has been a little difficult, especially toward the beginning of my publishing career, was you don't have a publishing team behind you and you don't have an advance, and you have to put your money into, you know, getting your cover design and your editor. And let's be blunt, it's a little expensive. It gets there.
Yeah.
So I think that is something that a lot of people maybe don't realize when they go into the self-publishing business as well, is that it does have an upfront cost, just like starting any type of business. And you really have to do your research to make sure that you're not wasting your money and make sure that everything is good to go before you hit that big publish button.
Yeah, that is so true. And even though I run the press, and it's a traditional press, we do advances, it's not like a self-published press, the costs are so much cheaper if you're a press. That's one of the other, there's all these glass doors when you're indie. So like the Vow That Twisted Fate, I self-published because I didn't feel like it was going to fit the market enough to go traditional. So I didn't publish it through the press. And it is going to cost me the same amount to publish 4 traditional books through the press that it cost me to do one self-pub using the same people. So yeah, like Skye said, you have to sort of budget for that and look at it as an investment and know that you're probably not going to make your money back for a few books. So it's like you got to have a couple books out there. So it's all a big learning curve. We're actually going to do a author coaching live with some professional author coaches that help authors with their businesses in March. So subscribe to my channel if you are an author and you want to be in on that. Bring all your questions about that stuff to them. I will have some for them too. We got a sort of long one, so I'm going to put it up on the screen. How are you guys planning out 2022 for your new projects? This makes me think of what you just said, Claire. What have you learned from last year that you're going to improve on to be more productive next year? Claire, I'm going to let you start with this one because you sort of spoke to this a little bit.
So I'm actually in a whole new situation this year because so I did have a full-time day job and then I finished that at Christmas. So this is my first year working entirely for myself. Yay! Still feels a bit weird to say, but there you go. So yeah, a bit like Skye, I also edit and do some other author services type stuff like outline coaching as well as writing. So I'm trying to be kind to myself and accept that I'm still learning quite how this is going to look for me. I mean, since 2018, I've been publishing around a day job. So this year is going to be a big learning curve. I mean, in the past month, I've already learned a lot about actually this way of working is better for me. So I journal and things like that, and that helps me learn and sort of process how I could have done something better or what worked about a particular situation and things like that. So yeah, I'm trying to do that, and my original plan for this year probably had way too many books planned. So yeah, I've scaled that back a bit, and I'm trying to just be a bit more sensible, and as I say, just be kind to myself and accept that this way of working is a learning curve as much as sort of actually the continual curve of learning to improve your craft and learning to improve your marketing and stuff like that. So So yeah, that's sort of a big part, and I think especially the past couple of years have been involved a lot of learning and upheaval for people as well.
That's great. So, Skye, Melissa, how do you go about planning out your projects?
So for me this year, I've done a quarterly planning because last year, like Claire just said, I put too much on my plate and, said I was going to do a lot more than I was actually able to accomplish. And especially because I am working a day job as well as doing editing and writing and, publishing my own books, and that it's all a lot of work. So it's work I love. So I will say that right now, that I love every moment of it. It's just that it does take time to balance. So I'm doing quarterly planning this year and making sure that I, have goals that I hit each quarter that are more obtainable than they were last year. And I'm not setting as big of publishing goals this year as I am just getting myself organized and getting myself back in the flow that I was in the year before last, which kind of just, exploded on me. So yeah, with everything going on, that's kind of why I chose this year to do my hardcovers, because I know that I've already got the book written. There's a few things I want to, fix and change and edit so that I get to have that bonus in there, but it's not as time consuming as some of the other things. And then I started my editing business in the last quarter of last year. So I'm still kind of learning the ropes of that as well and figuring out how that works with me and where I'm at in my career right now. And hopefully this year will be the year that I too can say goodbye to my day job. So that's the goal. But yeah, it's a lot of planning and a lot of being realistic with myself about my goals. And that's something that I had to change last year versus this year, is that smaller goals are easier to obtain and they are also more fun to celebrate when you finish. So rewarding myself has been a big thing this quarter. But what about you, Melissa?
That's kind of the same thing. I with the two novels that I'm working on now, I was kind of hoping to have an outline going into them. With Thread of Magic, when I was writing that, I had an entire outline before I started writing it. And with these, I keep waiting to kind of like solidify an outline and just realizing that it's just not going to happen. Sometimes you have an outline going in, and sometimes you're kind of a pantser and you take it as you get it. And so I'm kind of learning that it's okay to take your time sometimes in what you're writing. Last year it was, I have to write so many words a day. I have to get this done. I have to have this chapter done by the end of the week. And it was, very, very much a timeline where I felt pressured to have it done by a certain time. But, this year I'm kind of more like, it's okay if it takes 6 months to write. That's okay. It's okay to take your time if it's better. If it turns out better in the end than it is to rush it. And okay, well, now it's done, but is it done in the best way it could have been done? And so that's what I'm learning this year, I think.
Yeah, yeah. And I feel like Claire, you're ahead of me, and Skye, you're ahead of me, and Melissa, we're sort of on the same page. It's finding that balance and also letting the creativity sort of flow. And that transition, Skye, is no joke. I did it last year from full-time office worker editing on the side to full-time editor. And there was a period of 4 months where I was editing full-time 40 hours a week and office working 40 hours a week. And it was the longest, most nightmarish 4 months that I've ever worked. But you want to make sure you're going to bring in enough to support yourself before you cut the cord with a corporate job. So I'm thankful to my corporate job, but I'm also thankful to be working for myself. So we got one last question. I know we're a little over, and then we'll call it a day. And Melissa, I'm going to let you start on this one because I know you've already signed, but it's a really good question. How do you decide which books you want to self-publish and which ones you decide you're going to go traditional. And then Skye and Claire, you're welcome to chip in here too. How did you decide to go with a thread of magic to be the one you're traditional?
For me, it was do I think that there is an audience for this type of story? And do I think that there's a lot of people that would be open to reading this kind of retelling of a fairy tale? Whereas some of the other things that I'm working on, there might not be as big of a readership or an audience for it. And those are the ones where I'm like, I want to get it out there, but there might not be as big of a market for it. So I might self-publish a novella or something that's shorter or something that might not have as big of a reach as opposed to something where I think there might be, a lot of people out there who are like, yeah, I want to read that. Those are the ones where I might I send out and I'm like, hey, do you want to work with me on this? And do you think that this would be a good novel to put out there for the general public, as opposed to, because it's kind of a different audience, I feel like, between indie publishing and traditional publishers, and they both have like definitely an audience and a readership, but they're not necessarily kind of the same not type of person, but they're not exactly the same audience with one versus another. And so that's how would it be better for this type of audience, or would it be better for this type of audience? That's kind of how I decide like which ones I want to send out and which ones might be better for like this smaller niche audience. So yeah.
Claire, Skye, how about you? How would you decide which books to go indie and which ones to try to query for traditional?
I was going to say, do you want to go, Skye? So all of mine are indie. As I mentioned earlier, I write in the same world for all of the books that I've got out so far and the ones that I've got planned for this year. So for me, there's kind of a question of rights with that. So I would want to keep all of those indie, because you can get traditional deals and offers where they say, we want all of your books that are related to this book, that are in that same universe, that are in that genre or something like that. So for me, I don't want to create like a conflict in those. And for me, I would consider like there's this a vague series idea that I have that's not in the Saberverse, and that is a slightly different like niche of romantic fantasy that's more kind of gaslamp Victorian. That I would potentially consider shopping out to trad, and that would be because, like I say, it's not in the Saberverse. It's also like I say, a slightly different subgenre. And for me, it would be more of a potentially like a loss leader or kind of a partnership thing that would let me reach new readerships, so the people who walk in the UK into like Waterstones or Barnes and Noble in the US or whatever, and see those books on the table and on the shelves and go, oh, what's this? Whereas they maybe don't shop and browse on Amazon, for example. So that might give me an opportunity to reach that kind of other segment, like you said, Melissa, like almost like maybe there's a Venn diagram of readerships, and let me access a different area. And then if they like the book that I've published additionally, even though I might make less money on that book, they might well then go, oh, what other books is this? Let's look up this Clare Sager person. What else has she got out? And then find my indie books, and then I can make my money through that. So that's kind of my thought process behind that.
Yeah, for me, it's funny because it wasn't really that Kingdoms of Fairy, my first series, it wasn't that I thought it wouldn't work in the traditional publishing world. It was that I had gone to school for writing and had spent so much time not finishing my projects that I was just like, I'm going to just do this myself. I'm going to, I don't want to wait anymore. And so I think that was kind of a big thing with me, was that I was just impatient. And it was fun. I felt like one thing that I really love about self-publishing is the sense of accomplishment that comes along with it, because you have to work really hard to self-publish a book. And not to say that traditional publishing doesn't work hard too, because you have to query, but it was just like, oh, I have to find a cover designer, I have to find an editor, I have to make sure my book is up to par with all these other books on Amazon. And that was just fun for me and what I wanted to do with that book. And then now with my new series that I'm working on right now, I do think that it fits the market really well for traditional publishing, because it's got, the shifter romance and the fae and all those things that are really popular at the moment in the fantasy romance and paranormal romance world. So I am planning on querying that one, and then probably self-publishing more books in the future, because I like doing both. I love the experience of self-publishing, and I like the freedom that comes with it, like others have mentioned, and the rights that come with it. But I also wouldn't mind, seeing my book on the shelf in Barnes and Noble and being like, I didn't have to work to, get that there. My publisher put it there. I didn't have to go, walk into the store and beg them to put it on the shelf. I think that would be nice. But yeah, so that kind of how I decide, is just depending on the market, like you said, and then also depending on my own patience level and what I think is going to work.
Yeah, and I feel like this all knocks it on the head. I wanted to hear your opinions, because I feel like it's sort of a interesting perspective from my end. Books that I sign for the press are a mix of ones that I feel like the audience isn't as represented online. There's a big portion online, but like Melissa said, they're in stores and they're going to go in and they're going to browse, and there's just a glass door there. That for me, like you said, Skye, to get a book in a Barnes & Noble or Books A Million is me walking in with a check for like $200 to buy shelf space and beg them to take a carton of your books and know you're not going to make a penny. Like, you're basically sacrificing a crate of books to go, if this sells, buy more from my Ingram. So if you're watching this and you're a self-publisher thinking about it, you definitely have an option to put your books in stores. There's indie bookstores around the world, but it's a lot more work. You've got to upload to like Ingram Spark, who's a distributor, and then you have to go tell people, because Ingram doesn't go, hey, buy her books. You have to like go to the individual stores and say, buy my books from Ingram, and hope that they buy it, and hope they put it on the shelf, and hope they put it where somebody can see the cover so they want to look at it. And so it's a lot of stuff, but I personally feel like the indie author side, to what Skye said, is just so freeing in a way, because you just have complete control over everything, and you know when you're done that if this book's an award winner, this book's in a bestseller, this book is not even any of those things, and somebody just says, this is one of my favorite books, that you own all of that, I guess. Is not that it wouldn't still be meaningful if you were traditional at all, but it's just something different knowing how much blood, sweat, and tears you put into getting it out to the world. So that was a great question. Lots of good questions today. Thank you, everybody who participated, everybody who put your questions in, and especially Melissa and Skye and Claire. Seriously, it's so amazing and humbling to meet my role models in the writing community. So thank you so much for joining us. I hope you have the best of 2022. We've got people saying thank you all for talking with us, and it's our pleasure. If you are interested in following any of these ladies, you can scroll through my comments and click on their Instagrams, click on their Amazon pages. I dropped them in there. We are going to be doing more indie author live chats over the next few weeks. We have Portal Adventure Fantasy tomorrow. And then at the end of February, we actually have one coming with a bilingual set of authors that write in more than one language, and or use translators. But I think all three of these people are bilingual writers themselves. So I'm interested to hear what it's like for them. So you can subscribe to my channel and get notifications when we go live. But thank you all so much for being here.
Oh, thank you so much for having us.
Thank you so much for talking to me.
And I wish you all the best. We'll talk to everybody soon. Bye.
Thanks. Bye.